And welcome back to another episode of the MindCep Podcast. And this is your host, Alex Muir, helping millennial professionals maximize their performance. And in today's episode of our special guest series, we're going to be chatting with John Vespasian. John is the author of 11 books about irrational living. Vespasian has lived in Germany, Italy, France, Spain, and the Netherlands. His books combine his passion for history, investing, and personal development, reflecting his philosophy of rational living, productiveness, and respect for the individual. And in the words of Vespasian, the purpose of my work is to draw practical lessons from history. He explains, if you want to make good decisions, you have to look at the big picture and learn from the wisdom accumulated in centuries of human experience. Knowledge is the only valid response to stress, the only formula that can make you more effective, Vespasian argues. My books contain the wisdom I've accumulated in decades of research. It's all about learning from other people's successes and mistakes and figuring out how to apply those principles to your own life. In every book, I go through biographies and historical events with the goal of extracting from them lessons we can use right now. And please welcome John Vespasian to the podcast. And this episode is brought to you by RadioGuestList.com, the #1 free radio guest, podcast, and talk show guest expert interview booking service on the internet. Appreciate you joining us today on the MindCep Podcast there, John. And I know that you've recently released your 11th book, is it?
Yeah, it's a couple of days ago. It's still starting to sell. I had some problems with Amazon for the description, but now it's working. It's perfectly available. I saw it already in Japan, in Italy, so it's coming through the system. So yeah, I'm very happy with that. Yeah,
that's awesome. And where are you calling in from?
I'm currently in the Netherlands.
Netherlands.
I am European, so I've lived in several countries, but I'm not American, because I always get the question, you have a weird accent. Yeah, but I'm not American. Yeah.
Gotcha. And are you originally from the Netherlands, or you grew up somewhere else?
No, I'm originally from Spain. I lived for a long time also in Germany, in Belgium, in the Netherlands, in France. So I've lived in different countries, picking up different languages.
Wow.
And I'm living in the Netherlands already for a long time, so I'm quite happy here. But I view myself as European. I have a European mentality, I think, in many things. And that's the kind of books I write. I think, European books in the sense that they are very much based on history of thousands of years.
Yeah. And I really like that, because I was doing some reading on your newest book, Undisrupted, and then it talked a little bit about how the books that you write, they have a lot to do with like history of like our previous ancestors and thought leaders. And then how their successes, like what we can learn from their successes and their mistakes, right?
Yeah, unfortunately, we learn very little, because it's very frustrating that we tend to make always the same mistakes. But okay, there is a certain logic behind, because it always requires effort to research, to learn, to try to understand human behavior. It seems so easy to do what is sort of natural, short-term oriented, and it generates catastrophe after catastrophe. I mean, you see it in history. Now we have this coronavirus story. I call it story because mostly it's a story. And when you look in history, you see similar situations in many centuries. People becoming completely driven by stories that when you look at them in perspective, they don't grow to anything. I mean, after a few months, they say, okay, actually, it was not so bad. But you have now, unfortunately, as people learn from history less and less, as people read fewer and fewer books, everything seems new. Everything has to be rediscovered. It's like reinventing the wheel all the time. And it's very sad, but that's human nature. Unless people sometimes are against the wall and they have to learn, it's easier not to learn anything and not to and just make mistakes after mistakes. Yes, very, very sad. but that's the way it is.
Yeah, and I've definitely noticed that as well. Like a lot. I mean, there is a small percentage of people that do go to college or university, or they don't go that route. They go another route, and they self-educate themselves, right, through the books that they read, audiobooks, podcasts. There's so many different ways to learn today, but I definitely agree with you on that a lot of people, they're definitely not taking advantage of, all of the tools and resources that we have at our disposal to become a great learner. And like,
when you see that almost everybody has access to the internet, I mean, not for free, it costs some money to have access to internet, but it's relatively inexpensive. Most people nowadays in industrialized countries have access to internet. You could think that it would be used for gaining knowledge, for becoming more effective, for acquiring skills, for learning languages, whatever. No, actually it's used now mostly for entertainment and basically for strengthening prejudice. People try to read always the same kind of sources, the same kind of news they already believe in. So it has not improved, I think, for most people, it has not really improved their skills or their ability. It has only perpetuated the nonsense that was already there.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. And it's a lot of propaganda on the internet. There is good information out there, but you need to takes a while to find sometimes. Because there's a lot of noise, right?
Yeah, what can I say? I think it's good that it's commercial, that people try to sell their products as I try to sell my books. I think it's perfectly acceptable. This is the way it should work. The problem is that you have to really operate with a little bit of distance. You have to really see what you want to get, what you want to learn. It's too easy to be entertained forever without actually learning anything, or without improving your lifestyle or improving your situation. So what I try to do in my books is to go deeper in history, to go through hundreds and hundreds of biographies. Every book goes through dozens of biographies from different centuries, sometimes very close to us, sometimes from the ancient times, from the ancient Greek or ancient Roman. And I try to draw from them lessons, practical lessons that we can apply today in the 21st century. So every book explores a different pattern of human behavior, a different way to improve your effectiveness. The book, the latest one, is called Undisrupted. And basically what I've done is to go through many biographies to try to see how people, successful people, deal with disruptions. Sometimes very, very severe disruptions, when people lose their jobs, or they lose their health. They face a crisis in their life because they have problems with relationships. They're unhappy with their general situation, with their jobs, and how they actually solve the problem, how they overcome the obstacles. And I also show what you shouldn't do. I also present many examples, people who were very successful, very wealthy, very well-known, with a very established reputation, how they actually lost everything very quickly because they didn't have the skill to deal with disruption. So it's a very harsh book, I would say, because the lessons are sometimes very difficult to accept. But I think the patterns that I present in the book, the patterns of behavior, the patterns of thinking, I think they're very useful, especially today when we are facing this coronavirus constraints. Many people are going crazy, thinking that it's something completely new in history, but it has happened so many times in the past, and there are lessons to learn from history. You don't have to repeat always the same mistakes.
Yeah, and I was going to ask you about that, like how it feels as if do you feel as if your books are like kind of like a like a guide showing, like, for people to be able to see, this has happened before, just in different forms?
Yeah, the idea is that human beings will learn mostly from stories. It's very difficult. I mean, there are many people who write about philosophy and personal growth and personal development, There are many authors in this area, but I would say that most of them start with abstractions, and they start with some usually good idea that people, for instance, imagine and say, oh, you should be optimistic, you should be an extrovert, you should be driven, you should have a plan. And they have these very abstract ideas, and they present them in a book. But when you read them, you get the idea, okay, this sounds nice. I mean, something I should do, but then it's forgotten very quickly because it doesn't really go into your habits. It's a good idea, but it's quickly forgotten. I think we only learn from stories. When you read about stories of people who faced these kind of situations and say, okay, they faced constraints, they faced bankruptcy, they faced severe sickness, they faced financial catastrophe, and you see how they reacted. And then you remember very quickly, because when something similar happens to you, and you lose your job, or you lose your spouse, or you face a huge problem, it's very comforting to go into history and say, oh, I know the story similar to I know what people did, how they actually surmounted the problem. And this is very inspiring, and it's very motivating. Abstractions are not necessarily remembered so quickly, because you might get a good idea from a book, but if you don't know the examples, if the examples don't go into your brain, they don't go into your mentality and your spirit, and then they are part of your baggage, and then they come back naturally. Yeah. This is why I make so much emphasis on stories, on real stories from real people, because in the end, this is what we remember when we have to make a decision.
Yeah, and I really like how you said that about like real stories from real people, because I've read a lot of books, and you definitely nailed it there, like how they distract you in the beginning, and then you're kind of like left like, okay, is this just like another personal development book? They say all the same stuff. Because I went through a phase of my life where I was reading a lot of personal finance books, and then after a period of time, I just noticed it was just the same information regurgitated a different way. And because what I'm after for myself is like practical principles from real stories from real people, however long ago, it can be thousands of years ago, hundreds of years ago, that I can apply to my life. And I definitely like what you said about how you can use history. Yeah.
Yes, I usually get, I read a lot. I do my books backwards, in a sense, because I think when most people want to write a book, they say, okay, I'm going to write a book about Beatles. And then they spend like 2 years reading about Beatles and investigating and doing all kinds of research. And then they write a book. I work completely backwards, because what I do is I read a lot of history, literature, psychology. I read constantly all kinds of books. And I make notes. So I have material for dozens of books in the future. So I don't have to really start from scratch. I have the stories already, because I collect the story. I collect biographies already for years, because it's my passion. I like history. And I like history from a very practical perspective. I don't want to become just to memorize dates and biographies, because it's a complete waste of time. The way people learn history at school is completely worthless, because it doesn't really teach you anything. It's just memorization. What you want to learn is patterns. And when I find stories that I particularly intriguing, then I try to make a book around the stories. And the idea for this book, Undisrupted, it came from a biography I read, might be now 2 or 3 years ago, about someone who was very, very famous, very wealthy, and he lost everything in a very it was a horrible story, actually. But I found it very intriguing. And the name of this man was Mamontov. He was a very famous industrialist in the 19th century in Russia, a top celebrity. Is the Russian equivalent of in the US. There was a steel industrialist doing railroads, was Andrew Carnegie, was originally Scottish. And Mamontov is the Russian equivalent of Andrew Carnegie. So he built railroads before the communist revolution. He was very wealthy, very sophisticated, because he studied in France. He spoke several languages. He was very well read. And when he was in his 40s, he was on top of the world. I mean, he had a huge house in Moscow, also a house in the south of Russia, a country house. He had a huge art collection. He was a very really celebrity, very wealthy man. And then something happened, and I found it super interesting because this guy who had this company, this huge railroad company, he got the idea that he could actually produce steel. And it was not a crazy idea because, I mean, he was actually running a railroad. So I thought maybe I could make steel and I could make my own railways like Andrew Carnegie was doing in the US. I thought maybe I could do it. And then he started a steel mill to produce steel, and he started to lose money. He didn't realize the learning curve was actually much bigger than he thought. He was a good manager, but I mean, to make steel, I mean, even for Carnegie in the US, it took him actually a long time to get it right. I mean, he had to actually sometimes lose a lot of money because there are different technologies, different procedures. So Mamontov started to do in the US, in Russia, and he started to lose money. I mean, really a huge amount of money. And then he thought, okay, what should I do? And then he made a terrible mistake that I found super interesting because many people make it. Instead of giving up and say, okay, this is not my area, this is not my expertise, I should just close this company and, okay, I lose money, but that's it. Instead of doing that, he made the mistake that most people make when they are facing a disruption. Instead of realizing that they should go back to the basics, they should just do what they know how to do. They should retreat to their area of expertise, to their friends, to their territory. They should do something that for them is familiar and is safe. Instead of doing that, Mamontov did the opposite. He started to take money from the railroad to subsidize the steel mill. He actually took a lot of money from the railroad. His shareholders found out. And they sue him and they say, why are you doing? I mean, this is not your money, it's money from the company. I mean, he was a shareholder, the majority shareholder, but still he had bondholders and shareholders, and people became very angry. I said, what are you doing? Why are you taking money to pay for this adventure? He was sued. He was prosecuted also for embezzlement. It was a big scandal. He was on the front page of newspapers for years. It took a year to go through a trial. Eventually, he didn't go to jail, but he lost everything. They took away from him his art collection, his houses, his shares, everything. And for the last 13 years of his life, Mamontov lived in total misery. Nobody would talk to him. All his former friends, they refused to talk to him. When people actually met him on the street, they crossed the street not to talk to him. He was total isolation. And eventually, he died very miserable. And then you have the question, how is it possible that someone who is so clever, so sophisticated, so experienced, how could they make this mistake? And you see this mistake made today. You see the typical movie star who makes millions and then he loses everything in stupid investments. The basketball player who loses his money. I mean, you see the story happening over and over and over again. And why is this? And the pattern behind this is actually very simple. When you're facing disruptions, and you see in the stories in the book, I didn't find a single exception, actually. When you face disruptions, people who do very well, who are able to surmount any kind of problems, literally health problems, financial problems, job losses, these are people who go back to the basics, who really know what they know and what they don't know, and they go back to their area of expertise. People who lose everything, who destroy their lives, who are completely wiped out by disruption, these are people who improvise. Improvisation is the cardinal sin. You should never improvise when you're facing a crisis. Don't try to go through a learning curve that could take years. Don't try to do it when you are against the wall. This is the something that people like to do because you have this constant brainwashing in the media. Just do it. Just do it. Don't think about it. Just go for it. This is very nice if you have a plan B, but you should never do that when you are in a crisis. And in the book, I present many examples. People who lost everything because they improvise. when you are in a crisis, do not improvise. Go back to the basics, and most of the time you will do very well.
Gotcha. Yeah. And by going back to the basics, and you're saying your area of expertise and the current knowledge that you've accumulated.
Yes, I have been reading a history for now, I think maybe 20 years. I have to say, I never learned enough because, I constantly improving and learning from different countries and different things. But to put together history with personal development, I think is the way to approach the self-improvement movement, because otherwise you get lost in abstractions. I've been reading myself books about personal development for decades, and I have to say, I started to write these kind of books because I could not find something similar. I find the ideas interesting, but if you don't have examples that actually demonstrate how to apply the principles are quickly forgotten.
Yeah, that's right. And would you say that's the answer to one of the questions that I have for you? What is the key to dealing effectively with disruptions? And would the answer be going back to the basics?
Yeah, this is one of the answers. I mean, in the book I present actually many different principles taken from stories, but this is one of the main answers. But I can give you also some of the other principles, because I think they're most of them they are not self-evident. One of the principles you also find in people who are very resilient is that they stick in their lifestyle. They have a very strict segmentation, which means the following. When they are working, or when they're having friends, or they're having, social activities, wherever, people who are very resilient, they learn from experience that it's better to distribute your time and your attention and your resources in segments that are self-standing, or they're isolated. If you have only one type of friends, and mind you have, 10 friends, 10 close friends, and they're all together, and you're always meeting them together, and this is just like your circle. It happens very often to people that when they divorce, or they move to another town, or they change jobs, they could lose all their friends in one go, because they are all like in a group, very closely related, and they have the same hobbies, and they have the same ideas. And if you don't have segmentation, because you have different friends in different areas, in different things, you're placing all your eggs in one box, and it's dangerous. And the same goes in your skills. I mean, I'm not telling people to have 20 jobs, because this is totally unrealistic, but you should have 20 skills. Especially in these times when you could find yourself constrained in your profession, because we're now in these times of this coronavirus, but tomorrow will be something else. I mean, this virus will be forgotten in a few weeks, a few months, and then something else will happen, and there will be another crisis, and there will be another constraint, and there will be another obstacle. And people who have different skills, and they have been developed this, what I call in the book segmentation. And this is an idea I got from the 19th century from a very wealthy inventor and industrialist, Stephenson, who was living in the UK, who actually made locomotives, but his field of expertise was investment. He was a very good venture capitalist. He raised money, and he started railroads in different cities. It was in the 19th century. In the UK, it was a huge business, and he was constantly starting new companies and raising money to open new railways. And Stephenson almost went bankrupt. I'm talking about the son, Robert Stephenson. He almost went bankrupt when he was young, because he made a mistake, and instead of creating a corporation, he created a partnership. And he was personally liable for all the debts. So he was very close to distraction within actually a couple of years. And then for the rest of his life, he applied very, very strictly this segmentation principle. He separated his risk. He organized his day from the morning to the evening in segments that were isolated. So when he had a problem, and he had many problems, financial problems, constant litigation. I mean, he had many problems, but he dealt with a problem within a segment. He had a segment of the day with like 1 hour for raising money or for making presentations. He did it in the segment, and then he went to the next segment. And then the problem was forgotten until he actually had to deal with this segment again. And this is a very good strategy for your skills, for your friendships, for your lifestyle in general, to try to have these self-contained areas, because it makes you very resilient. If you lose a source of income, you lose a job, if you have different skills that you have been developing little by little, it doesn't have to be in one go. If you have this segmentation in your life, you are going to be super resilient. This is why I call the book Undisrupted, because what you want to do is you will never be perfectly undisrupted, because everybody has to deal with problems. But if you have a lifestyle that is very resilient, nothing will take you down, because you can always rely on different skills, on different friends, on different areas, and you will become basically indestructible. And this is what happened to Stephenson when he went through his financial problems when he was in his 30s or late 20s. He learned a very difficult lesson, and he became almost very extreme in his segmentation. And for the rest of his life, he did extremely well, because when he made mistakes, the mistakes were always very limited.
Right. And I like how you talk about segmentation, because the way I understand segmentation is basically time blocking problems or time blocking skill acquisition. So like you're going through your day, or before you even start your day, you have it planned out to do, let's say, a 1 hour podcast, and then another hour for editing, and then let's say another hour for doing pre-recording more podcast episodes, or could be anything, or writing even. Yeah, right? You're like setting
this
aside.
This is the thing, because it makes you very strong. And if you manage to develop different sources of income and different skills, nothing will take you down. Because if you are losing, I don't know, you lose your outlet for some product, doesn't matter. You will have something else very quickly. So this is an important lesson from history from the 19th century. But today, again, we are in this coronavirus story. I hope many people will learn the lesson for the future, and they will become even stronger.
Yeah, and then another question I want to ask you was, if someone was recently laid off their job, and they were let's say they were in marketing or sales, but on the side they've been accumulating a lot of skills in digital marketing, and they've built an online blog, outside of work, just in their free time. And they've been trying to learn digital marketing to build a digital business that runs on autopilot. What would you say to someone like that they've been building the necessary skills so they are indestructible, but they've recently got laid off? What would you say to someone like that? Like what they should, any additional advice?
Yes, the question of the building a digital income is that in most cases is quite slow. Unless you are super lucky and you choose a market niche that is growing, and you are really at the right time. For most people, I mean, eventually most people become successful if they improve constantly. But at the beginning, it's quite difficult to make money online. I mean, sufficient money to replace your income. So when people lose a job, and if they're good at what they do, if they like sales, for instance, or they like marketing, for most people, the best solution is to find another job. They can continue to build their business online until it becomes self-sustaining, which might take a couple of years. If it's not the case, I think it's easier and faster to find a job, and then people become more confident. Because problem is, you have a business and you just starting, and you push and push and push. Sometimes it requires time. You can push as much as you want, but to acquire reputation on the web, because Google will find you, but will find you slowly. It's you have to get a reputation, you have to get links, and this takes time. So I would be realistic. And for most people, when you lose a job, unless you have a readily available second income source that you can really exploit, it's better to find another job. Now, for finding another job, you might have to move. And this is something that in my books I underline very heavily, because some people become depressed when they cannot find a job. They say, oh, my life is over, and they send applications around them. But you have to realize that the markets in the world, and this is why I called my latest book Asymmetry, because markets are asymmetric. And this is something for human beings it's very difficult to accept, that we tend to like things smooth and balanced, but life is not like that. Wherever your expertise, wherever your area of work, there will always be good markets and bad markets, and you can be super clever and super motivated. But if you are working in a market that is obsolete, that is not growing, it's very difficult to grow your career, because you are going to be touching the ceiling, hitting the ceiling very, very early. So for many people, the solution to career success is going to be moving to another area, to another city where there are more opportunities. And today, we're going to face, I think, in the next months, massive unemployment due to the situation today. Many people will have to find better opportunities, because they will not be able just to go back to the previous situation, because the previous situation has changed. And sometimes it's very hard to accept the facts, but I think it's better to learn from history. And there will be many new opportunities, because I think the current situation will open many business opportunities for companies selling self-reliance, encryption, selling business continuity. There are many opportunities, but they will not be the same opportunities as before.
Right. And I've definitely noticed that after this coronavirus is over, this pandemic, whenever that is, it's definitely, do you feel it's going to change business pretty much forever of how we do things because of the potential for it to happen again?
Yes, I don't think that the same thing would happen again, because I mean, there will be lessons learned at the moment. Since we're in the middle of the hurricane, I think we don't have sufficient perspective to see what's going to happen. But eventually, okay, this will pass. I think for many people, we realize, okay, it was really, I mean, I'm not denying that there are problems, and for many people, they are getting severely sick. But overall, I think when we look back in history a few months from now, they will say, okay, actually, it was really not so bad. It was a bit exaggerated, the whole thing. And we will learn lessons. And I think people will focus in the future, I mean, at least people who want to learn from history, we will focus in diversifying, segmentation, business continuity, diversification of skills, having your customers accessible to you at all times, so that you can sell even if there are disruptions. You can still keep your customers, because now for many retail operations, this is not self-evident. I think many retail operations, they realize that if they close for a couple of months, the customers might not come back. They don't know the customers, they don't know who they are. So basically, there is no possibility for them to actually do a promotion, because the business is very much location dependent. So there will be lessons learned. I think people become even stronger, people who want to recover. I think also that for most people, the recovery will be very quick. As soon as we go back to a normal situation, the recovery will be, I think it will surprise everybody how quick it is, because in most countries, the economy is very resilient and people are very resilient. But it's going to take some effort. But I'm very optimistic about the future. And you can see that after a difficult situation, the stock market is recovering fairly quickly. And I think it will recover in a few months, even better, because the infrastructure is there. The production possibilities are there. We just have to turn it back again, turn it on again, and then it will go back to the previous level. So I'm not really worried about the future. I think there are lessons to be learned. Most businesses will become much stronger. They will learn from the situation, and we can look at the next decade, I think, to a very prosperous world, improved situation, And I hope that everybody can profit from these improvements.
No, for sure. And again, like when there's times of disruption or turmoil, there's also times of opportunity for the future. And sometimes you don't see it right away, like you said, but coming out of this, I definitely feel there's going to be tremendous opportunity for those that are ready and willing to learn and be students. And
I would like to mention,
and
Alex, I would like to mention a couple of ideas from the book. I think they would be very interesting for your audience. One of the really controversial things that I present in the book is the relation between problem solving and positive thinking, which nowadays I think for many people is like a religion, because they say, you have to be positive, you have to be positive, you have to be enthusiastic, optimistic at all times. I always been very skeptical about it. I think unless you have an extrovert personality naturally, and you are an extrovert, and you are by nature you are very much open. For most people, it's very difficult to sustain an enthusiastic, motivated, driven attitude all the time. For many people, it's almost impossible, and it consumes a lot of energy. And we have this constant pounding in the media about being positive thinking. You have to believe it, and this kind of stuff. You see it in the movies, you see on television, you see it on the media constantly. And I think it's very misleading. It has become like a dogma for many people, but you have to approach it carefully. And what I've done in the book is actually to go to the history of positive thinking, to explain why it works sometimes and why it doesn't work most of the time. For most people, actually, it doesn't work. And you see that in the US, I think, which is the epitome of positive thinking, where the main ideology is very strong. You have 50 million people with depression. Taking medication against depression, anxiety, stress. It's really a lot of people doing that. And it's not because they are not sufficiently positive, I have to tell you. It is because they have, I think, a very unrealistic view of the world. And this is the problem with positive thinking, that people get worked up and say, I'm going to make it, I'm going to be successful, I'm going to win. They repeat the story to themselves all the time. And then they crash because they have problems. They have to face obstacles, adversity, bad luck, and then they become completely depressed. And when you look at the origin of positive thinking, I think it's very interesting to take a look at it, because it shows you why it works and why sometimes it doesn't work. The origin is French, and it's not American. Most people think that this is an American invention, because the most famous author was Norman Vincent Peale. He's a U.S. Author from the 1950s, 1960s. But it was not his idea. It's a French idea, this idea of positive thinking. It was invented by a Frenchman, a pharmacist, actually, who lived in Nancy, in the north of France. His name was Émile Coué, and he was a scientist. So this pharmacist, who lived in a small town, actually, he was a very intelligent person, highly educated. He was in this small pharmacy in a small town, selling preparations, mostly herbal preparations, to his customers. He wanted to grow his business. He tried everything, but the market was limited. The products were always the same. He was selling the same products as everybody else. But he was looking for ideas. And eventually he saw in a newspaper, he saw an advertisement for a course on hypnotism. He hesitated, because to do the course, he had to move to another city. He had to close his pharmacy for 2 weeks. But eventually he saved money. He went to the course. He took the course. It was a week. And then he came back to the pharmacy. He thought, how can I apply these theories of hypnotic powers to a pharmacy? And since he was a scientist, because he had a university degree, he had studied pharmacy, he started to apply not positive thinking, because he didn't call it positive thinking. He started to apply auto-suggestion or suggestion, positive suggestion to his customers, to his patients, so to speak. And when people came to the pharmacy and said, I have a headache, I have problems with my back, I have a cold, whatever, he gave them the prescriptions, the medications he was giving them, and then told them a story. And the story was very colorful. He told, you have to take this, you will recover in 2 weeks, and it's very good for you. And he told them a story about improvement. And the story was, in the end, a story. But people recovered. He was keeping statistics, how fast people recovered, and whether he was actually changing their lives. And it was a fact that after telling these positive stories, people did recover very quickly. And he became very famous. I mean, people came to this pharmacy from dozens of miles because they thought that he had sort of magical powers. And Coué applied this suggestion in his pharmacy for 50 years. He made a fortune, because he was the most famous pharmacist in France. And eventually he retired in his 50s, and he spent the last 15 years of his life writing about positive thinking. And the question is, why did it work? Because it's not the stories that work. It's not that Coué was just telling people, you will get better, and then they got better. No. The reason behind, and this is super important for understanding why this works when you're dealing with disruptions. The reason why it works is because when Coué told them, you have to take this prescription, you have to take this preparation 3 times per day after the meals, and then you have to go to bed early because you have to sleep 9 hours. So he gave them good ideas. The problem is that if people are not motivated because they don't have a picture of success, a picture of recovery, they will not take the medication. They will not follow the diet. They will not go to bed early. They will not do anything. And then they will complain that it doesn't work. But the problem is they are not following the prescriptions. The great advantage of Coué's approach is that he was motivating people to do the right thing. And when you put together this positive thinking, this suggestion, when you put it together with an actual good plan and good behavior and constructive action, you become very strong. You become very powerful because it works, because the underlying principle is correct. He was motivating people to take the medication, and eventually they became better. So this is very important, and I underline in the book that it's very good to be motivating, very good to be positive, but it has to be linked to rational behavior. You cannot expect magic to happen, but if you do it together with a good plan, it is a very powerful approach.
To the point where you were talking about how the pharmacist, he was helping his patients with telling them a positive story, right? Before he gave them their medication. Okay,
so I'll pick up from there.
Huh? Sure, yeah.
So the question is that the pharmacist was a scientist. He was keeping statistics. He was checking if the customers actually recovered, and he realized that it was working. It was working very well. Many patients became much better very quickly, and they started to tell their friends and the family. And within a year, the pharmacy was exploding with patients. People started to come from very far away just to go to this fantastic pharmacist. And within a decade, he became extremely wealthy, and he retired in his early 50s, and he spent the last 13 years of his life writing about positive thinking. And the question is, why did it work? And this is super important if you are interested in the ideas of positive thinking, the law of attraction, what they call now neuro-linguistic programming. This is crucial to understand that Coué invented the whole movement later it became very famous in the in the U.S. Through the works of the author, this Norman Vincent Peale. But basically, it's a French movement at the beginning. And Coué realized that what was working is that he was motivating people to do the right thing. He was motivating people to take their medications, their preparations, to take it regularly, to go to bed early, to have a healthy lifestyle, to change their diet. And the stories motivated people. The stories in the sense that he was telling them what was going to happen. He was motivating them to do the right thing. And this is a key idea. Positive thinking, the law of attraction, all these kind of methodologies, they can be very powerful if they are linked to rational behavior. Coué was telling his patients to do the right thing, to change their lifestyle, to change their habits, to take their medication, and they became better because they believed that it was going to work. And what they believed was rational because it was a good behavior, and eventually they recovered. So it's very, very important to understand that when you're facing disruptions and you're facing problems, you lost your job, or you lost your savings, whatever, or your health. I think to be motivated is very important, to be positive, but it has to be linked to a rational plan of action. So if you lost your job, it doesn't help to get depressed. It doesn't help also to become artificially optimistic. You should be enthusiastic and optimistic, but you should have a plan. And the plan could be to apply every day for 20 positions. It could be to develop your skills, whatever. But to be positive without a plan is just stupid. I mean, it's purely delusional. And I think this explains why you have so many people with depression in the United States, because it's not about positive thinking, it's about delusion.
That's really, really well said. I don't think anyone's explained it like that before. Yeah. No, I like that. So the positive thinking has to be linked to, again, an action, like a rational action.
Yeah, it's very important. And you don't have to be super motivated, because when you read books about personal development, you have the idea that the only way to improve is to have a plan and to implement a plan and to be super clear about your future and about your goals. And I have to tell you, when you look in history and you look at the real stories, this is very unusual. Most people who become super successful and who become very happy, which is also very important, they do not necessarily have clear goals. When you look in history in different centuries, you see that people have what I call in my books a sense of direction. They know they want to do something in some area and they want to improve, they want to make money, they want to make a career, but it's not that they have a clear goal. It's not that people wake up when they're 16 and they say, oh, I want to be a CEO of General Electric, or I want to be the manager of a computer company. I mean, it doesn't work like this. This is extremely unrealistic. And when you look at this kind of advice, no wonder that people become depressed, because it's so ridiculously unrealistic. It is better to evolve towards success, towards recovery, towards a better life, little by little, by using your strengths. If you don't have a clear goal, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that you have a sense of direction, you have an area, you have a goal in a very wide sense that you want to improve your life, and this is more than enough. You don't have to be super clear. I think the time people waste trying to write their goals in 20 years, which is amazing, because you go to a psychologist or a therapist, I think they actually tell people, write down your 20 goals. Most people cannot even write 2. And it's perfectly fine, because life is complicated. And for most people, it's very stressful to write these goals, which are most of the time realistic. And in the book, I present many, many stories of people who actually were not very clear about what they wanted, and they actually found success, and they found a way to go through disruptions, very little by little, trial and error, by going in a certain direction, but without having clear goals. I think the emphasis that today we place on goals is very much exaggerated and very unrealistic.
No, I hear you on that one. And then what steps, I think you briefly already mentioned it before about, attaining more skills and brushing up on your current skills, but what steps can listeners take to protect themselves from unforeseen threats in their environment?
Yeah, I think it's super important to keep informed. And this is something that people confuse with watching TV or reading newspapers. Today, we have so many sources of information that are free or almost free. I mean, you can spend your whole life watching cat videos on YouTube. I mean, you can. This is not information. This is not what I mean. I mean that if you are trying to develop your skills in a certain direction, could be professionally, could be in your health, you want to improve your health, whatever, you should be focused on getting information. And I think the very best way to do that is to have an RSS reader, a news reader, or you put it on your phone, and you can scan very quickly the headlines of a dozen blogs, publications very quickly every day. It will take you 10 minutes. But then you will be really on top of things. I think this is super important to protect yourself against disruptions, because if you don't know the trends, you don't know what's coming, and you can see it sometimes for weeks or for months. And people know, I mean, for instance, when the stock market goes up and goes down, it never happens within 5 minutes. Usually you can see it months in advance. And if you don't keep track of your investments, or keep track of your health, or keep track of the professional area where you're working, you risk too much. I think it's super important for most people to install on their phone a news reader. It's free. There are different apps for that. And instead of spending so much time watching TV or watching YouTube or watching entertainment, I think they should spend 10 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day reading headlines in the area of where they want to improve, because they will get a lot of ideas for free, ideas they can put into practice. And this is super important. And this is a great advantage of the 21st century. Unfortunately, there are not many people who are using that opportunity.
Gotcha. So I've never heard of a news reader. So basically you're saying it creates an RSS feed of curated information in your line of work?
You have different ones. You go to newsreader or blog reader on the whatever, your Android or Apple, whatever. You can find different apps for free, and then you just subscribe to the different newspapers, blogs, I don't know, whatever you like to read. And you get the headlines on your phone that you can click on them if you want. But this allows you to go through really dozens and dozens of news items very quickly. Compared to the television, it's like, 100 times faster. It is free, so you should use it. You should use it, because even if you just want to learn, whatever your hobby is, you want to learn, how to play chess better. I mean, come on. This is the right way to do it, because you get the information in real time, and most of the information is going to be free.
Right. Yeah, and I can really relate to that, because that's how I built an understanding and a base or a foundation of knowledge in finance, because I was very super fascinated by investing when I was really, really young, like 9 or 10. So I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, the Hawaiian real estate investor. And then my knowledge kind of kept growing over time, because I kept reading books on finance. And then what I started to do was like read curated articles from the Global Mail and different finance blogs for people that have been in the finance field and currently, invest in stocks and real estate, and they talk about their experience. So that was very beneficial and very helpful for me to learn about investing, because I got pre-curated information from all these, different investment, journals or blogs which talk about investing. So it definitely helps you to give an edge or to develop that knowledge more.
Yeah, this is absolutely true. In this book, Undisrupted, I devote one of the chapters to Bernard Baruch, who was an investor in the 1940s, 1950s. And I found it very interesting because this guy was very calm. He was never super stressed. He was never super driven, because today when you see the stock market, the trader seems like they're always under extreme stress about the latest price quotation. And this guy, Baruch, I mean, he was following trends, but he spent every day, he went to the park in New York, and he spent every day at least an hour sitting on a park bench reading the newspapers. He would take the newspapers to the park, he would sit there quietly. Even when he was in his 80s, he lived 95 years. Even if he was old, even if he was working on the White House, because he was an advisor to several presidents in the US, he would go to the park and sit down to read the newspapers for an hour. This gives you an idea that, it doesn't take so much to get the information. I mean, today you would not read the newspaper on paper most of the time, but still you need the habit of reading the headlines, because it will keep you alert, and you will see many trends that most people cannot perceive.
Right. That's really good. Wow. Yeah, I appreciate you joining us on the podcast today, John. And before we leave for today, is there anything else that you want to add for our listeners, or how we can find you?
Yes, I'm very easy to find. If you just type my name, John Vespasian, on Google, on any search engine, you will find all my books in a second. There is also a blog with hundreds of free articles. There is also a free newsletter. I'm very, very easy to find. Just type John Vespasian on the internet, and you will find everything in 1 second.
Awesome. Right on. Well, appreciate you joining us today, John, and thank you so much for the awesome interview. I gained a lot of value from our conversation today and your stories that you shared. Really appreciate it, and I really appreciate the history behind the stories as well, talking about the 19th century and beyond. It was really insightful and gained a lot of value today.
Many thanks, Alex. Talk to you soon, okay?
All right. You take care.
Okay, bye.
And I hope you guys all enjoyed that episode of my special guest series with John Vespasian. If you want to hear more about episodes like these, follow me on my social media. I'm on all the social media: Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube. But most recently, I've been utilizing the Anchor app to record all of my podcast episodes. Occasionally, I will record my podcast episodes via Skype or Zoom, but to simplify things and make things more seamless, I do most of my recordings through the Anchor app. And the reason I use the Anchor app is because it's free, and it distributes all of these podcast episodes to all of the podcasting platforms. So wherever you listen to podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Anchor, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, whatever ones you listen on, my podcast will be on there. So be sure to subscribe or follow the MindCep Podcast. That's MindCep Podcast. And I can help you maximize your performance with the interviews from my special guests that I have on the podcast, and then my one-off episodes where I dig deep into powerful phrases, quotes, and my own personal experience to help you guys get through these testing times with the COVID crisis. So hopefully everyone is staying safe, staying healthy, and hope you guys all enjoyed this episode. Take care.